right, we are gonna be live. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for Proper Title Live. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Sabrina Beer. I'm the Director of Digital Media and Education here at Proper Title. We are talking about the differences between residential real estate transactions and commercial real estate transactions, because there is a lot of talk, a lot of people, especially real estate brokers, real estate professionals, and even buyers and sellers that think commercial is just like residential, just maybe a little different. But in actuality, it is completely different. And so today I brought Jim, or James, however you know him, on today. So James, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure, and thank you so much for having me, Sabrina. My name is James Cermani. I'm an attorney in the Chicago suburbs in Oak Brook Terrace. I've been practicing law for about 18 years. I've had my own firm for about 12 years, and I practice both residential and commercial real estate, so I see firsthand the differences and also very aware of the traps and tricks and pitfalls that people run into, and some people don't even realize they're falling into the traps. So I figured it'd be worth discussing this today.
So worth it. Thank you so much for spending a little time with me this morning. So let's just dive into it. I think the first thing that we should really talk about is let's distinguish the differences between what is considered residential versus what is considered commercial. Obviously, we know residential are houses and condos and townhomes, but what is commercial real estate?
Sure. So the biggest difference between the two is, not necessarily the type of the property, but what you hope to get out of it. So if it's that single family home, condo, townhouse that you're living in, that's residential. But if you're approaching this from a business standpoint, from an income production standpoint, now you're into commercial. So it could be an apartment building, could be, warehouse space, office, retail, could even be farmland, or, that type of vacant, industrial property. But the point is that you're trying to drive income from it versus just having a place to live.
Oh, I like that. Drive income from it. That makes sense. However, not to be confused with a residential investment property that's
Right.
just like a one single unit.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So you could own a 50 unit apartment building, or you could own one single condo that you rent out as well. So that condo could be considered commercial or residential, in this context. So.
Right. It's that part is a little like
Mhm.
consult your attorney and your real estate broker.
Right.
But it's interesting because I think a lot of times people don't think of commercial real estate when it comes to, a 6-unit apartment building or something like that, because they think of it as, well, residentially people are, living there, but in actuality it is a commercial transaction, right?
Right, exactly. Lenders, title companies, brokers, appraisers. If it's that 6-unit apartment building, they're going to look at it, like commercial. They call it multifamily, sometimes instead of residential. So.
Right. And so, Jim, what is like the kind of biggest difference if let's say you're a buyer and you're buying your first commercial real estate piece of real estate, you want to use it income. And I know it depends if you're buying an office building or a multifamily building, but what is like some of the bigger things that just you need to be aware of if you're going to head into this type of transaction?
Yeah, the biggest thing, is the mindset going into it. Even if you've bought and sold a lot of houses or condos or whatever for yourself, you have to approach it more like a business transaction versus just like a larger residential transaction. So you have to be going in like analyzing risk differently, analyzing the numbers differently, understanding that no deal is the same. You may not be using the same kind of form contracts. They're just maybe different mindsets from between buyer and seller. The seller may be someone who normally sells, major, giant, projects, and is selling this one little unit, and they're going to approach it differently than people who always buy, smaller commercial properties. So, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, you had mentioned you need to analyze the risk differently.
Mhm.
What does that mean? Like, what is the risk that?
Sure. So, yeah, so due diligence, like you could say on, a residential deal where you're just buying a home for yourself, it's basically a home inspection, and you might expand that into radon or, lead-based paint or sewer inspection or whatever it might be. In the commercial world, it's very different because you're number one analyzing the numbers, the rents, the rental income, your expenses. What if the property's vacant? What if you need to put a new roof or a new HVAC system on it? What if the tenants leave? What if the tenants stay but don't pay you? So there's, what if the zoning is wrong for your desired use? So there's so many, what if the tax bill goes up after you buy it and you thought you'd have all this cash flow and it sinks to nothing because now the taxes are higher. So you have to like kind of be aware of all these things. And, if you're not, have the right team in place, to help you with this sort of thing.
Yeah, and I feel like there's so many nuances, right, to these commercial buildings, like you mentioned, especially in the city of Chicago, when it comes to zoning, when it comes to what it can actually be used for, where somebody might see this vacant space and they think they can just put a restaurant in there or something like that, right?
Right.
I feel like those are a lot of part of the due diligence period.
Yeah.
Because and I'm assuming that there's also tax repercussions that are associated depending on what area you're in as well, or what it's being used for.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's city to city, county to county, even within the city of Chicago. There are different wards, different aldermanic districts. The alderman has, much more power and authority over what goes in different places. So you might see, my neighbor has a 6-unit apartment building, when in reality, like the typical zoning is for only 4 units, or what have you, and you have to go get a variance for that. All of a sudden,
Variance.
yeah, sorry. So you have to get a special permission to put up that certain type of structure. Now all of a sudden that costs you more. Now your investment's not doing as well. So just another these little traps that you could fall into. So there's just so much more kind of education and homework you do in these deals.
It's such a more complicated deal too, right, James? Like it's like from an attorney perspective or a title company perspective, right, or a real estate broker perspective,
Mhm.
it's almost like, I mean, I don't want to say, I don't know what the math is, but I feel like it's like twice as difficult, if not more, to get from the, going under contract to closing in a commercial transaction.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, in terms of like the contracts and putting the deal together, um, a lot of times you have a two-step process in commercial deals. You'll start with what's called a letter of intent, or an LOI, and that's kind of just like a 1 or 2 page outline or framework of the deal, like the big points, purchase
Like
price,
price, okay.
closing date, earnest money, the parties, identify the property. And then once you have that nailed down, then you move on to a longer contract. The idea is not to, waste a ton of time trying to draft a contract when you don't have the business points done. So you don't want to get to the legal points and the nitty gritty stuff before you have the main points done.
Let's
So
go, let's just rediscuss that just a little bit. So first you do the letter of intent,
mhm,
LOI, I believe it's called, right? Okay.
mhm.
And that's just a kind of almost like a bullet pointed summary, if you will, of who's buying this property, what they're buying, what they're using it for.
It could be related to that. You could have like conditions in there that we intend to use this as a office building. It was previously retail. If we can't get approval to use it as an office, we want the right to walk away from the deal. So if you don't negotiate that up front, you might lock yourself into a deal. And now you have a nice retail space that you don't intend to use or can't use.
And that LOI can go back and forth like a negotiation of any other type of contract, right? But in
Right.
actuality, it's not really a contract.
Right. It's typically not binding, or there will only be certain elements, certain parts of it that are binding. But yeah, so Whereas in residential, the brokers, the realtors are going to, work out those terms. In a commercial deal, the attorneys might actually get involved in that stage and, start giving input earlier on in the transaction. So
And so then then the buyer and seller, right, with whoever is brokering the deal or involved in the deal, they come together in an agreement with the LOI, and it's like, okay, we got this. And now a contract comes up, and is it a form contract that typically gets used, or what kind of contract?
Yeah, in some cases you use a form like you would in residential, but most of the time, and the bigger the deals get, you're going to custom draft a contract, and the attorneys will usually handle that. So, these contracts could be 10 pages long or they could be 40 pages long, depending on, the level of complexity you want to incorporate into the deal. So, that's where you also have to be very careful, because if you just assume everything's normal and standard, you might be shocked to find out that that's not the case, and it turns out what you thought the other side was going to pay for or what they were required to do is actually your responsibility to pay for or to accomplish. And you don't want to find that out 30 days into the deal or the day of closing. So got to be really careful.
Yeah, no, please go ahead.
I was going to say another thing, a huge thing in residential deals, in almost all the form contracts that we use in Chicagoland, there's an attorney review period.
Yeah.
In the commercial deals that use these custom contracts, there typically is not, because all of the review and the negotiation occurred ahead of time. So if you go and sign one without an attorney's involvement, and you're like, don't worry, I've got 5 business days or 7 business days for my attorney to review this, it's probably not the case. So please be careful about that.
Oh, wow. That's y'all. Did you hear that? That's really interesting. Okay. So when you do the LOI, it's probably the letter of intent. It's probably best to engage your real estate attorney at that time, because from that is where the attorney is going to draft the contract most likely. Once that contract is drafted and, the attorneys have redlined it and gone back and forth, and you have this final version that then gets executed. Now are you now like in this deal? Like what kind of contingencies do we typically have after that?
Yeah. So you've got a lot of the same contingencies, but typically like broader. So there could be your like inspection contingency. But the inspections could be much more diverse, right? It's not just the physical inspection of the property. A lot of it's environmental. A lot of it could be related to reviewing the leases, the tenant payment history, that sort of thing. Because again, there's this whole other side of the deal where you're evaluating it from a business perspective, from an income perspective, zoning, et cetera. So you've got that. And the earnest money sometimes works differently in commercial as well. Be aware of that. In residential, a lot of times it's the realtors holding it, their offices. In commercial, it's very likely going to be the title insurance companies that hold it, because that's more commonplace. And we're talking about bigger dollar amounts. Sometimes if you have $100,000 or more as earnest money, you might want to invest it. You might want to get interest on it. The title companies will typically allow you to do that.
Yeah, that's interesting too. Gosh, all of this is it's just so different, right? It is such a different world. And a lot of real estate brokers or even just buyers are like, oh, I want to buy my first, commercial investment. And the real estate brokers like, I will, and do this. And hey, real estate brokers, if you're doing your first commercial transaction, please partner with somebody that does this all the time. Because it is a totally different world. And like you were just saying, and we see it from the title perspective when people get involved. And same with real estate attorneys. Like if you've never done a commercial transaction, please get the training needed before you go and do that. Because in addition to like the contract, like you were saying, the due diligence, the attorney review period that doesn't exist, Also, then there's a whole slew of financing, right? And I know you're not a mortgage lender, so we don't have to dive in deep, but
Yeah.
can you just briefly talk about kind of the financing of these transactions as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of the same theme throughout this. The commercial lenders are very concerned with the income of the property. So right when you're doing a residential deal, what's everyone concerned about? Is it going to appraise? The appraisal might be like the biggest stumbling block because you've already kind of vetted the borrower, the buyer. You know, is their credit good? Do they have a job? Do they have income? Do they have down payment? Um, you could have all of that in commercial, but if the lender looks at the property and says, this thing, you're going to lose $300 a month for the next 5 years, they're not going to approve that loan. So that's the biggest difference between the two processes.
And usually you have to put more money down as well, right?
Yeah, you're typically going, the standard and residential is 20%, and it goes all the way down to zero with like a VA loan or something, or FHA 3.5. Commercial, you're probably thinking 25% is pretty typical. So.
And the interest rate, again, I know you're not a lender, but the interest
No.
rates are also typically higher on a commercial loan.
Yeah, definitely will be a little bit higher, and the cost of the appraisal will be higher. The fees will be higher. And another big thing in general too is the lenders will often do their own due diligence. They may require a certain environmental assessment, environmental review. They may require a certain type of survey, a more detailed survey. They may require different title insurance coverage that's going to cost you more. So even if you as the buyer are like, I don't care about a survey, I don't want to do an environmental inspection, they might say, well, it's not up to you. If you want us to give you the money, we need to be more protected or more kind of, they're more risk averse. So, which makes sense. If it were my money, I'd want to be very careful about it too.
Yeah, and there's a good question here in the comments. What if they have multiple sources of financing, like multiple investors?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So that's a whole other topic for another day. But yeah, you could put together groups of investors who come together, pool their money to purchase real estate properties. That's very common, especially as the purchase prices climb. And different people can have different roles. You can have someone who's going to do the legwork and then operate and manage the property afterwards, whereas someone might just be the money person who just wants a more passive investment. And you could combine that with having a loan as well. So there's a lot of, and speaking of that, if we want to touch on it, with residential deals, if you're buying a home for yourself, you'll typically buy it individually with your partner, spouse, maybe in a trust. With commercial, you're almost always using a business entity, most likely a limited liability company or an LLC. So that's a whole other end of it. And then if you have that, then again, what is the lender going to say? They're going to say, that's great. Congratulations on your new LLC. But we're going to want you to personally guarantee this loan anyway.
Oh.
So, you might think like, oh, just free and clear. I have the LLC. But they're like, nah, we want you to be personally responsible for this.
So most likely, let's just say I'm going to buy a commercial space, whatever this looks like. I'm not purchasing it as Sabrina Beer. I'm probably purchasing it as Sabrina Beer LLC or whatever my company is. Yep. But that LLC could also be me and 2 or 3 other people.
For sure. Yep.
But because we don't have any history as a company, we're still almost like purchasing it individuals and personally guaranteeing it, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So with respect to the rest of the world, it's the LLC. With respect to the bank, they're like, nah, it's Sabrina and her friends or family or business associates. So absolutely, the bank's like, that's so cute that you have that LLC, but really it's you and Courtney and Amanda. So yeah, so definitely.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that LLC formation, does that need to be done prior? Like, when does that happen?
Yeah, great question. A lot of times we'll do it sometime during the transaction. So after the contract is signed, but before the closing occurs. And a lot of times you'll actually assign the contract from you or whoever the individual is to the LLC prior to closing. So you'll do an assignment. You have to make sure everyone's aware of that, the seller, the title company, and all that. So,
yeah, when I, as a real estate broker, I did a couple commercial transactions, and I'll just say it's like 3 times as much work than a residential transaction from a broker perspective. And it definitely seems like it's the same thing from an attorney perspective. So I would imagine, in my experience anyway, but I would imagine that the attorney fees are going to be different than what you would expect on a residential transaction, because it's so much more work, so much more complicated.
Yeah, in many cases it is. In the residential world, you normally see a flat fee because it's more standardized. You kind of know what you're getting into. Not to say that deals aren't more complicated or can't go sideways, but in commercial, it's like you expect it to be complicated from the start. You don't know what to expect. So in most cases, attorneys are billing on an hourly basis because that way, both your client and the attorney it's kind of a fairer deal. Because if I say some low flat fee and then it becomes more complicated, that wouldn't be fair to me. If I say some high flat fee, because I'm like, oh, it's going to be very complicated, it ends up being simple and everyone, just everything lines up. Well, that's not fair to my clients either. So usually we do it on an hourly basis.
Yeah, that's been my experience, and it makes perfect sense because it is more complicated. It is very unique per transaction versus any kind of form, whatever. So y'all, anybody that's listening, I really highly recommend give Jim or James a call. Residential, commercial, if you're curious, whatever the case is, his contact information is here below. It's also in the comments, whether you're watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram. His contact information will be there. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things really quick, Jim. I think that one of the biggest things that people need to understand is the letter of intent. I think that is something that's very unique and different. If you're coming from a residential real estate perspective, in addition to bringing in the attorney immediately, like when you identify the property, so that you can really understand, because they are going to be the true experts, in addition to your broker, your real estate broker that you're utilizing for this transaction. I think all of those things. And then the last thing I will say is, in my experience, and I want to know if this is your experience, but every commercial transaction is completely different. It is its own set of everything, depending on who's buying it, where it is, where it's located, what it's used for, what it's been used for, how old it is, all the things, right?
That's absolutely right. And I have clients that buy a lot of like $1 million warehouses in the suburbs of Chicago. So we have what seems to be or could be the same transaction over and over. Every single one is different. Same property type, same purchase price, same lender, same client, different deal every time. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for letting me tap into your brain this morning. This was extremely interesting, and I know we just barely scratched the surface on this stuff. So thank you so much. For all of you listening, if you are going to get involved in a real estate transaction, please utilize a real estate attorney for your real estate transactions, not just somebody that is an attorney, somebody that practices this stuff day in and day out, because they're going to know the nuances. These are one of the biggest investments of your life, if not the biggest investments of your life. Please, please, please contact somebody like Jim for your real estate transactions.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. Y'all be kind to each other.